I want to find out how do I need to figure out how to get rid of that. Inshallah, we'll find out. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. In the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful. Verily, our praise is due to Allah. We praise Him, we seek His aid, and we ask for His forgiveness. We seek refuge in Allah from the evils of our own selves and from the evils of our own actions. And whomsoever Allah guides, none can misguide. And whomsoever Allah leaves astray, none can guide back to the correct path. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We testify there is no deity worthy of our worship except for Allah, who is alone in a partnership, never has and never will be another. And we bear witness that Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, is the last and the final prophet of Allah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, brothers and sisters, friends and family, everybody tuning in to the live stream and everybody joining us for the Zoom meeting. Jazakallah khairan for joining us now for another edition or season of our Sunday discussion. Today, inshallah, we're going to be starting a new piece or new book of When the Moon Split, which is a biography of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, written or at least published by Dur Salam. This is probably one of the most comprehensive or one of the most popularized of the biographies of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, maybe comparable or relatively as popularized as the sealed nectar. And this copy of the book can be found, free copy of the book can be found online at Kalamullah at books. I had somebody requesting for the book to follow along here, inshallah. Give me one moment here. But today we're going to be opening up, inshallah, and reading through. Generally, the beginning of the book is going to be the preface of the uh, um, preface and author's notes and so on and so forth. And Bismillah for the person requesting for the book, inshallah. Follow the link that's here on the Zoom chat, inshallah, and you'll be able to get a free copy of that book, inshallah. Anyone else who's joined in. Assalamu alaikum, everyone else who just joined in, inshallah. But with that, let's go ahead and get started. The contents after its initial pages here, like I said, publisher's note, from the author, preface, and then we're going to be getting into the very basis and start of it, which is the ancestors of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which will then chronologically go through the life, the actions, and leading up to the prophethood up until the ultimate death of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So the publisher's note, Bismillah, start as that the biography of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a very noble and exalted subject. The heart of every Muslim is filled with the love of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Love and respect of a person depends on the benefits he or she gets from him, and as the Prophet is the greatest benefactor of humanity, every Muslim has deepest love for him. Allah the Almighty has described and explained the status of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Quran in Surah 3, Ayat 31 of the family Ali Imran. Say, O Muhammad, sallallahu to mankind, if you really love Allah, then follow me, i.e., accept Islamic monotheism, follow the Quran and the Sunnah. Allah will love you. So to highlight the exalted status of the Prophet, sallallahu and to bring in light the efforts made by him in propagation of the divine message, the religion in truth, and the hardships he endured in the preaching of this religion, especially at the time, which was perhaps most unsuitable socially and intellectually for the acceptance of the message of truth. Safiur Rahman Mubarakpuri has presented this book. And the facts about the life of the Prophet ﷺ have been collected from the Quran, the authentic Hadith, and other authoritative and reliable sources so as to compile the book on factual basis without any distortions. And the translation and its editing has been done by professional people having an experience of presenting many books on the religious topics. The name of this book has been chosen from the great miracle of the splitting of the moon in half, where Allah has described this miracle in the Quran, saying in Surah 54, Ayat 1, Allah says in English translation, "The hour has drawn near and the moon has been cleft as under or asunder." And following hadith is also made about the same miracle, where it is narrated from Anas, radiallahu anhu, that the people of Mecca asked the Prophet ﷺ to show them a sign, a miracle. So he showed them the miracle of the cleaving of the moon, as mentioned in Sahih Bukhari. So we hope that all Muslims who read this book will find in them a new zeal towards their religion and towards the performance of those religious, moral, and social duties which the religion of truth, Islam, demands from them. And the demand of Islam is totally for the benefit of the mankind, individually as well as collectively, not only for this world, but also to be beneficial in the life of the hereafter. And the non-Muslim readers are expected to acquire a true understanding of the religion of Islam and the last prophet Muhammad, as they have often misguided by the false pretensions supplied to them by foreign sources opposing to Islam. And I pray to Allah that this book may prove beneficial to all readers and that they get the full benefits so as to achieve the successes of this world and the world hereafter. The general mantra of Abdul Salam, Abdul Malik Mujahid. Well, the notes from the author here is that the biography of the Prophet ﷺ is a very noble and exalted subject, and it teaches Muslims about the rise of Islam and how the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was chosen by Allah to receive the divine revelation. And Muslims also learn of the hardships of the Prophet ﷺ and his companions, of how they faced and how they eventually succeeded with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help. So Muslims who study the Prophet's life, learn much more from it than the story of one man's life. They discover how Allah prepared the Prophet for his mission, how Allah revealed the Quran to the Prophet, and how the teaching of Islam fortified the hearts of the early Muslims, and how a band of small, faithful Muslims defeated Arabia's fiercest warriors, and how the truth of Islam triumphed over falsehood and its many devotees. And the Prophet ﷺ's biography thus helps Muslims better understand their religion. For this reason, scholars from the time of the Prophet ﷺ to the present have been very careful about determining the authenticity of the sources of the Prophet ﷺ's biography. However, not all biographers have made use of the available research. Many have written distorted accounts of the Prophet ﷺ's life, adding whatever appealed to them, regardless of its accuracy or authenticity. And consequently, there are many written accounts of the Prophet's life that contain information contrary to the teachings of Islam. And in light of these problems, many people asked me to compile an authentic biography of the Prophet based on authentic sources. And I accepted this challenging task and began piecing together this biography from the following sources: from the Quran, the authoritative explications of the Quran, authentic sayings of the Prophet, and authoritative biographies. And I pray to Allah that Muslims will benefit from this work and that it will be a source of blessing in both worlds. Safiur, Rahman, Mubarakpuri, and the date of which it was written, inshallah. With a preface before we get into the actual contents of the book is that When the Moon Split is based on Arabic sources and was originally written in Urdu. The translators were thus confronted with the arduous task of working with 3 different languages involving different narrative techniques. My sister's having trouble getting to the Zoom class. You will need a Zoom account to be able to sign in, inshallah. This one is a little different, so we wouldn't have to take pauses to allow people to come in, inshallah. So as long as they have, and this is also a new link, inshallah. Sorry for a quick pause here, but continuing here. So rendering When the moon split into English entailed more than a simple translation of the text. It required the adaptation of a text with its unique cultural framework to the standard narrative conventions of another culture. And at the same time, the translators were required to adhere to the outline of standard Arabic biographies to the Prophet. So limited by the narrative boundaries that define such biographies, our modest goal was to produce a text accessible to those who are somewhat familiar with the life of the Prophet. Sallallahu. Nevertheless, many readers may still find certain concepts, terms, or even certain events difficult to comprehend, and we recommend using a good reference book on Islam or Islamic history to clarify passages that appear obscure. And inshallah, as a side note here, if there's something we come across that we bring up in discussion, inshallah, we have discussions after the reading of the book, we can confront those then, or we can address those in the following week, inshallah, if something does need some further explanation. But those who have read other biographies of the Prophet, one of the examples I gave was the um, Sealed Nectar, may find When the Moon Split unique in that it is a straightforward account of the Prophet's life based on what Muslim scholars and historians regard as the most accurate and reliable sources. And no attempt has been made to modernize the Prophet by emphasizing certain of his qualities that are currently fashionable, nor by omitting or justifying anything that would be considered politically incorrect by some contemporary readers. Unfortunately, many Muslims have written about the Prophet ﷺ's life in English as apologists, hoping to appeal to a somewhat skeptical audience. And Professor Mubarakpuri wisely resists offering such justifications and explanations. The Prophet, after all, ﷺ, transcends time and culture and is not necessary to recreate him again and again for different audiences and different times because his greatness is apparent in any context, and the truth of his message and mission will endure, and the following pages are a testimony to that fact. So with that, we come to the actual beginning of the book, Bismillah, which starts with the Prophet ﷺ's ancestors. So lineage being an important consideration in Arab society, the Prophet ﷺ's family tree was well documented. He was born into a family that traced its ancestry back to the Prophet Abraham, alayhi salam, through Ishmael. And the Prophet's lineage is as follows: Muhammad bin Abdullah Muttalib bin Hashim bin Abdul Munaf bin Qusay bin Kilab bin Murrah bin Ka'ab bin Luway bin Khalid bin Fihr bin Malik bin Nadir bin Kinana bin Kuzayma bin Mudrika bin Ilyas bin Mudr bin Nizar bin Muad bin Adnan. Now, while all scholars agree that Adnan was the descendant of Ismail, there is much dispute about the number of generations between the two and the names of such descendants. And the Prophet ﷺ's mother was Amina, the daughter of Wahab bin Abdul Munaf bin Zura bin Kilab. Kilab also appears as the paternal ancestor of the Prophet ﷺ, and it is said that his real name was Urwa or Hakim, but he was known as Kilab because of his passion for hunting with dogs, called Kilab in Arabic. And the Prophet's tribe, the Prophet ﷺ belonged to a tribe known as the Quraysh, the most respected tribe in Arabia. Quraysh was, in fact, the surname of Fihr bin Malik or Nadir bin Kinana. Later, his progeny came to be known by the name of the Quraysh. And the Quraysh enjoyed a position of honor in the peninsula, the Arabian Peninsula, and one member of his tribe, Qusay, played an essential, vital role in establishing the greatness of this tribe. His real name was Zayd, and upon his father's death, his mother settled among the Azra tribe near Syria, and it was there that Qusay was brought up, and he returned to Mecca during his youth and assumed the trusteeship of the Kaaba. And the Kaaba was the first house of worship built for mankind. It was built by Adam, alayhi salam, and later rebuilt by the prophets Ibrahim and Ismail. And because of his prestigious position, He was at liberty to open the door of the Kaaba whenever and for whomsoever he liked, and he established the system of playing host to pilgrims who journeyed to Mecca, preparing large quantities of food for them, and serving beverages made from honey, dates, or raisins. And Qusay also built a house north of the Kaaba, which he named Dar al-Nadwa, and in it were held many of the tribe's official activities. And Dar al-Nadwa housed the tribal parliament, and marriages were also performed on its premises. And Qusay was entrusted with the standard and bow of the Quraysh, and no one but he had the right to fasten on the battle standard. And gracious and wise, he was obeyed unhesitatingly by his tribesmen who, under his leadership, settled in Mecca and grew from a scattered band of people into a homogeneous community. In regards for lineage, the prophet's lineage is called Hashmi, after his great grandfather Hashim. Hashim assumed the position to host of the pilgrims, a privilege which after him was transferred to his brother Muttalib, and after Muttalib's death, the progeny of Hashim reclaimed this privilege and retained it until the advent of Islam. And Hashim was very well respected, and he earned the title of Sayyid Batha, the chief of Batha, and he was called Hashim, one who mashes something because he used to mash pieces of bread in meat and soup and distribute it for others to eat. And the Quraysh were merchants by profession, and Hashim arranged trade journeys for them to Yemen each winter and to Syria each summer, and he obtained security for them from the authorities in both of these countries. In the Surah Quraysh, the chapter of the Quran which is called a Surah, Allah reminds the Quraysh of their debt to him for these important trade expeditions. And Hashim or Hashim once passed by Yathrib, will be later known as Medina, en route to Syria, and there he married Salma bint Amr, a lady from the tribe Banu Adi bin Najjar, and he halted there for a few days and then left for Syria. He passed away in Gaza, a famous city in Palestine, and at the time of his departure, Salma was pregnant, and she gave birth to a son whose hair had white streaks. She therefore named him Sheba, which means one with gray hair, and none of Hashim's relatives in Mecca knew about the birth of Sheba. And 8 years later, however, Muttalib found out about his dead brother's son and decided to bring Sheba to Mecca. When he entered Mecca with Sheba, the people thought the young boy was Muttalib's slave and referred to Sheba as Abdul Muttalib, which means Muttalib's slave. Thus, Sheba was known as Abdul Muttalib. And Abdul Muttalib grew up to be a very handsome man and became the leading figure of the Quraysh tribe, and he was the chieftain of the Quraysh and oversaw the tribe's trade caravans. And famous for his generosity, he was known and called the generous, and he gave his leftovers to the needy and even to animals and to the birds. And for this reason, he was described as the feeder of men on earth and of beasts and birds on the mountaintops. And Abdul Muttalib also had the honor of rediscovering the sacred well of Zamzam. This well had gushed forth when the infant Ishmael kicked at the dry sand while his mother Hajar or Hagar searched for water, and the location of the well had been forgotten ever since the tribe of Jurhum covered it when they were being exiled from Mecca. And one night, Abu Muttalib had a dream in which he was shown where to dig the well, and when he started digging next to the Kaaba, the well of Zamzam began to flow again. And it was also during Abu Muttalib's time that the Kaaba was attacked by the Abyssinian conqueror Abraha and his men, whom the Quran refers to as the companions of the elephant. And Abraha advanced with an army of 60,000 men intent on destroying the Kaaba, and by destroying the Kaaba, he hoped to divert Arab pilgrimages or pilgrims to his church in Yemen. And Abraha reached the valley of Muhassir between Muzdalifah and Mina, ready to invade Mecca. And as he advanced with his elephant, the beast that had terrified all of Mecca suddenly refused to move. And as for 60,000 soldiers, Allah, in defense of his sacred house of worship, sent flocks of birds to pelt the invaders with stones. and the soldiers were repulsed, and they lay felled on the stones. Their bodies resembled mashed corn, and apart from the miraculous invention of Allah in defense of the Kaaba, this episode in Meccan history showed the strength of Abu Muttalib's character, and he stood up to uh, Abraha's might in defense of his own property, unshakable in his faith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would protect his sacred house, the Kaaba. And Abu Muttalib's son, Abdullah, the father of the Prophet ﷺ, was a handsome youth. He was called Dabi, the sacrifice, in reference to the rediscovery of Zamzam. And when Abdul Muttalib was digging beside the Kaaba in search of the old well, the Quraysh watched him idly, and once he began to reach wet soil, they insisted on sharing in his discovery, and they raised a great clamor. And Abdul Muttalib vowed to Allah that he would sacrifice one of his 10 sons if he were allowed to uncover the well. And in the end, Abu Muttalib continued excavating and discovered the old well. And afterwards, he drew lots to determine which son he would sacrifice, and Abdullah was chosen. And Abdullah Muttalib, excuse me, Abdul Muttalib took Abdullah to the Kaaba and was prepared to sacrifice him, but the Quraysh, particularly Abdullah's brothers and maternal uncles, were opposed to this sacrifice. And finally, it was decided that 100 camels should be sacrificed in his place. Hence, the Prophet ﷺ is called the descendant of the two sacrificed ones, being Ishmael and his own father Abdullah. And similarly, he is referred to as the descendant of two elders held for ransom, for Ismail was ransomed for a ram, and his father for 100 camels. And Abdullah was married to Amina, the daughter of Wahab. Wahab was a chieftain of Banu Zara, and shortly after the marriage, Amina became pregnant, and before she could give birth to their child, Abdullah was sent by his father to Yathrib, or Syria, on business, but tragically he passed away in Yathrib on the return journey and was buried in the house of Nabgha, the Bani. So then Muhammad ﷺ is born. Muhammad was born in Shi'ib, Banu Hashim in Mecca. It was a Monday morning in spring, the 9th day of Rabi al-Awwal. According to some sources, it was the 12th of Rabi al-Awwal, 50 to 55 days after Abraha's failed attack on the Kaaba. And in Arabic, the word for elephant is fil, and hence the year became known as Am al-Fil, the year of the elephant. And in the Gregorian calendar, the date corresponds to April 22nd, 571 CE. While Amina was pregnant, she had a dream that a light was emanated from her lower body that illuminated the palaces of Syria. And when she went into labor, Shifa bint Amr, the mother of Abdul Rahman bin Auf, served as midwife. And Abdul Muttalib received the news of his grandson's birth with joy. He took the newborn to the Kaaba and invoked Allah's blessing and gave thanks. And believing his grandson would grow up to be highly praised, Abdul Muttalib named him Muhammad, which means he who is praised. And in keeping with Arab tradition, he then shaved the baby's head and circumcised him on the 7th day. And afterwards, he invited his fellow Meccans to a feast. And Muhammad was first nursed by his mother, and then by Ayman, his father's slave, an Abyssinian whose real name was Baraka, and she embraced Islam and migrated to Medina, where she died 6 months after the Prophet's death. The Prophet ﷺ had foster brothers. Thuwayba, the slave of Muhammad's uncle Abu Lahab, also nursed the infant, and at that time, Thuwayba was also nursing her own child, Masruh, as well as Hamza bin Abdul Muttalib and Abu Salama bin Abdul Asad Makhzumi. And hence these 3 men became foster brothers because they were nursed at the same breast. And in the care of Halim Halima Saadia. It was customary among the citizens of Mecca to put their newborns in the care of Bedouin women who had raised them for a couple of years in the desert, and the Meccans believed that the unspoiled, rugged desert environment would make their children strong and hardy. And furthermore, and upbringing among the Bedouins encouraged that the children would learn the purest form of the Arabic language spoken through Arabia. And Al-Muttalib was looking for one such Bedouin woman who would serve as a wet nurse and take his grandson to the desert. And some women from Banu Sa'ad bin Bakr bin Hawazin came to Mecca to offer their services to local families, and Abu Muttalib asked each of them to take his grandson Muhammad, but all of them declined the offer when they were told the child's father was dead. They felt the family of the fatherless child would not be able to reward them handsomely for doing this act. And Halima bint Abu Thuwaib had also come to Mecca that day. While all the other Bedouin women had found children to nurse, she was not so fortunate. She saw Abdul Muttalib with an infant in his arms and took pity on the child who had been rejected by the other women. She and her husband took the infant Muhammad back to the desert, and Halima was happy she was not returning empty-handed. Halima and her husband, Harith bin Abdul Uzza, both belonged to the tribe of Sa'd bin Bakr bin Hawazin, and these children became the Prophet ﷺ's foster brothers and sisters, and their names were Abdullah, Anisa, and Judama, who was better known as Shema, and Judama also nursed the Prophet ﷺ. And Halima's house is unexpectedly blessed. So Halima and her husband found that their lives changed the moment that they took Muhammad ﷺ home. They had traveled to Mecca on a frail she-ass, donkey, that could barely keep up with their caravan. And on the return journey, however, as Halima rode with the infant in her arms, the same animal moved so swiftly that it left the caravan behind. While Muhammad stayed with Halima's family, the house overflowed with blessings. Halima herself narrated that she brought Muhammad to her home during a drought. Her she-camel would not give a drop of milk, and Halima's child would cry the whole night out of hunger. And with the child so distraught, Halima and Harith found it hard to sleep at night. Things, however, changed when Halima brought Muhammad home and placed him on her lap. Her breast overflowed with milk so that both Muhammad and her own child drank their fill of milk and fell fast asleep. And when Harith went to the she-camel, he was amazed by what he saw. The she-camel's udders were full of milk and ready to overflow, and it gave so much milk that Halima's family was able to sleep that night on full stomachs. And Halima's household suddenly appeared to be untouched by the drought, although they lived in Dair Benu Sad, the most drought-stricken spot in that region. And the family's goat would return from grazing with their stomachs full of grass and their udders bursting with milk. Husband and wife would milk their goats often, while others failed to even get a drop of milk. And Halima's household continued to be blessed for the next 2 years, after which she weaned Muhammad, and although he grew up during a great drought, he had developed into a strong, healthy child. And Halima asked to keep Muhammad even longer. So every 6 months, Halima would take Muhammad to Mecca to be with his mother and other family members. She would then return with him to Dair Benu Sad. And after Muhammad was weaned, it was time for him to go back to his family for good. And when Halima took him back to his mother, she begged Amina to let her keep the boy longer because he had brought her good fortune. She pleaded he would grow stronger and healthier in the desert, far away from the frequent epidemics that raged in Mecca. Amina consented, and Halima returned home with Muhammad, happy at her extended good fortune. And 2 years later, however, a strange event occurred that frightened Halima and her husband, prompting them to return Muhammad to his family in Mecca. And this is the a narration of Muhammad his chest being open. Anas bin Malik related that one day as Muhammad was playing with some children near Halima's house, Jibril salam, the angel Gabriel, appeared and made Muhammad lie down. He then opened up the boy's chest, took out his heart, and extracted a lump of flesh from it, saying, "This is the portion of Satan in you." He then put Muhammad ﷺ's heart on a golden tray filled with Zamzam water, washed it, and replaced it in his chest. And the other children ran to Halima in terror, crying that Muhammad had been killed. And when they reached Muhammad ﷺ, they found him alive, his face pale from shock. And Anas later said that he saw the scar on the Prophet Prophet's chest where he had been sewn back together. And then we lead up to the time with Muhammad with his mothers. In the wake of this supernatural event, Muhammad was carried back to Mecca, where for the next 2 years he grew up under his mother's care. When Muhammad was 6, he accompanied his grandfather, mother, and Ayman to the journey to Yathrib, where his mother's family lived. And it was also where his father lay buried. And after a mother in Yathrib, they began the long journey back to Mecca, but Amina fell ill on the way, and she died at Abwa and was buried there, and therefore Muhammad was left orphaned. With that, since we just hit 7:30 here, inshallah, before we get too deep into the rest of the lineage of Prophet Muhammad, let's stop here, inshallah, and we'll continue next week. We'll go ahead and open up for the group discussion, inshallah. And if anybody has any thoughts or reflections they would like, please post them in the comments down below. Jazakallah khairan for joining us, and we hope to see you next week. Allahumma subhanaka wa bihamdi ashhadu wa la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.